Just go here, otherwise I'd have to Zoom and I'm not as see as that. I can sign on Zoom, but running a Zoom.
Yeah, you have to extra free.
I run it for like 4 people and not more. Huh? Public, this is a public meeting. It's on our agenda.
Today at
I did.
Typically, in non-coronavirus times, this room would be packed. Unless we went elsewhere, but see, the courtroom's still limited to 15 people, so I thought, here, because we had the public hearing, as you all know, in a bigger space.
Use impact for a meeting like this for
For a matrix scoring.
On a regular meeting sometimes, depending on what you're talking about, right? I did have, is this for master matrix scoring?
Mhm.
I didn't know if this was like a meeting where you guys talked about a bunch of different things.
No, you can get on our, every week, Abby declined, go to Abby after this. You can get on an email list that says what our agenda is. And so that way, in normal times, people can come. And we started Zoom last March, and we've been wanting to get online anyway. We just have one technical glitch after another. So we were able to go Zoom instead of trying to live stream it. And so that's worked pretty well.
Yeah, so for any normal meeting,
You can Zoom on.
but I mean, is anyone's allowed to come? I know that. Do you have,
Because we're
do
public
you have public commenting at all meetings?
at the end.
Yeah. And so you go through your meeting without, no one's supposed to say anything. And then at the end, you allow.
Yeah, now if somebody has something relevant to a topic, our board typically is pretty open as long as it's relevant. Technically, like the city doesn't allow that unless you go and sign.
Yeah.
Comments. Or if we have questions for somebody that we know is there that has relevant information. But if you just have a comment about anything, and then it's our job during public comments to listen. Yeah, if it's something we choose to agenda, well, that we listen, because for us to act on anything, it's to be on the agenda. I know.
anytime.
And a link is on, after the meeting, is auditor's office, you can get on an email that has it, has a Zoom, have our agenda. Like Monday, we have a really long agenda because we haven't, because we only have like 2 items on the.
Got a lot of people on
Yeah, we're still
So
coming in.
there'll be a lot of people. That's why,
And I want to read through the list of people that have joined by Zoom before we get started here, but I'm allowing extra time here for people to join in because it's about 5 minutes after 9. The meeting was supposed to start at 9 o'clock. So let me go through the list that I have here that is showing up through Zoom with us today. We have someone on an iPhone. We have Jeff Shipley. We have Linda Hedquist. We have Carol Connett. We have Diane Rosenberg, Harley Carter, Joanne Grigas, Juliet and Al Kaufman, Abby Decline, our auditor who's taking minutes, Adrian Dickey, Andy Hallman, Bruce, David Carter. We have Dr. Michael Olmsted. We have Eric Mitchner. We have Eric Randall. We have Jerry Stood. We have KDS. We have Kiki Casso. We also have, the list is really long, sorry. We also have Pam with us. We have Rich Sims. We have Sandy. We have Tori Witherspoon. We have Pat. And we have William and Susie Vesley that are all online with us. if you have a camera and if you're called on to speak, I want you to turn your camera on while you're speaking, okay? So that we have that and we can have the public see this once we get it posted up to YouTube after this meeting is over with. So that's the one ground rule that I'm gonna lay out there to start with. So we're ready to go.
All right, morning, everybody.
I got one more.
And we want to thank, I know we have 2 legislators for being on. I invited all 4 of them, and I'm glad that Adrian Dickey was on. Because as everybody knows, this is a pretty challenging issue, not just in our county, but statewide. And because the state really has the authority for making legislation in this matter, I think it's for them to understand how it impacts the county level. Any comments will be at the end. They'll be solely to matrix scoring. We had the public hearing on the 12th, and the intent for that, Darren and Susie were there in person. I was on the phone, and I did hear the comments, and we have the written ones that were submitted. And so we do thank you all for input there. But today, it's solely on any matrix scoring. Because we had our public, and if something's been said once, we don't need to hear it again. Okay, that said, we have in the room,
Okay.
so just put everybody there, Rachel. From Need Solutions, Jacob Adams, Susie B, John Kurt, Joe Ledger, Tom Adams. Okay, Aaron's gonna watch the screen because he has to let people in.
Okay.
All right, so why don't you just go through the scoring and tell us. You got it? And I know Darren and Susie were able to go out to the site when the DNR visited, correct?
Yes.
So thank you for that.
You guys have to go through the whole thing and then go back and go item by item, or should we just?
Go item by item. Yeah, the ones that you've taken scores for.
Number 1, matrix item, the closest to residence.
You
So
want to speak up just a little?
5 points for the additional separation distance to the closest residence. There's a map provided in the matrix that we submitted. And the buildings have been, just for all these questions, the buildings have been staked out by an engineer, and we've had several of the distances surveyed. So they are accurate. So the first one, we have 25 points for additional separation distance to the neighbors.
Comments from the board? Okay.
No.
That's 22.
Mhm.
Additional separation distance, the closest public use area. And that's like picnic areas, campgrounds, cemeteries, and such. And there's not any within 6,000 feet of that, so we have 30 points on that one. That's included. Number 3, additional separation distance above the minimum requirements for proposed confinement. The closest educational institution, religious institution, or commercial enterprise. We did measure to the church in Salina, and it's 5765 feet. And that is well over the additional separation distance for 30 points. Number 4, additional separation distance to the closest water source. Water source is to the west of the buildings. It's kind of a creek over there. This was also measured by the surveyor at 1166 feet. So that item qualifies for 10 points. Number 5, distance to the right-of-way. The Adams have elected to slide the building south, so they're not right next to the road. So we're actually surveyed in at 302 feet from the right-of-way, just over the rule there. And that is surveyed in as well. So we qualify for the 30 points for being the additional distance from the right-of-way.
We have concerns on that, representing the have extra copies of our comments. Our concern is, our concern is in this case that they have taken points for 302 feet. The minimum requirement is 300. The DNR would have to come out and measure for this, make sure they're eligible for the points. And once they've measured that, they will not come back to ensure the accuracy that the building is actually built with respect to where the stakes are placed, or the stakes are actually staged where they are. Raises questions about the accuracy of the production process and the compliance with being 302 feet across away from Solana Road in order to qualify for these 30 points. So we're asking you on the board to carefully consider this particular point before you award the 302 points. And we feel that this kind of pattern is reflected throughout the master matrix, where the applicants are simply doing the very minimum that's required in each of these categories in order to qualify for the points that they're setting. We don't think that this is particularly consistent with the message at the public meeting. We're saying that they were willing to go above and beyond the requirements in order to satisfy concerns of their neighbors.
So your contention is that they aren't going to guarantee that it's going to actually be 302 feet away from the roadway. That's all you're prefacing this on.
It's into consideration that this is a very close measurement they have here, rather than going beyond that. And if there's any error in construction or setting of the sites, you could actually end up with it being 297, 290, or whatever by the time the building is actually there.
Is your site locations, the corners on your building being surveyed?
There.
In location?
And so,
And it's been verified that those corner pins for the location of that building are outside of that 300-foot limit.
at a 302 for the reason that if it would happen to be 6 inches, I mean, we're talking about 6 inches worth of room, I think, when the buildings go in. And so the 2 foot gives us plenty enough room to where it'll end up definitely over 3 feet.
And I would like to point out that when we did take points on this, it is an elective. So the state actually for the buildings only requires 100 feet from the right of way. And so the matrix is electing that extra 200 feet.
Okay.
Okay, number 6.
Additional separation distance to the closest critical public area, which is the same as the public use area for this definition. Again, there are none within 6,000 feet of the proposed site, so 10 points. Proposed construction structure is 2 times the minimum required separation distance from all public and private wells. The required distance is 100 feet. The closest well is up at Tom Adams' house, and it is 3,830 feet. So that qualifies for 30 points. Number 8, additional separation distance above the minimum required of 1,000 feet to the closest ag drainage well, known sinkhole, or major water source. There are none within the 6,000 feet. The closest major water source is Brush Creek, and it's 9,885 feet away. So that qualifies for 50 points on that one. No points on 9. Number 10, separation from high quality waters, high quality water resources, or protected water areas. There are not any within 6,000 feet of this proposed site, so that qualifies for 30 points. Number 12, liquid manure storage is covered. Took points on that one. Actually has two covers over it. I mean, we have the pit, which keeps the animals from stirring it up. And then we have the roof, which keeps any kind of rain or anything like that getting into the pit. So the storage structure is covered. So we get 30 points for that one. Number 16, enhancement for the composting pile. And Jacob has a design here included. And, a plan for 3 different bays to allow composting to be started and clean materials kept and the pile to remain active. He's got a roof design and wall designs to help keep animals out, keep rain to minimum, keep it from leaching.
Are you doing that in your current building?
No, and it's not. It is not a part of my solutions on the other. This is one we decided to add on this site.
That qualifies for 30 points with that one. 17, the proposed manure storage structure is formed. This is saying that we are doing a concrete pit rather than an earthen lagoon. So the building is going to be meant to meet all the concrete standards that are required by the DNR, which is included in the construction design statement. It will be a formed structure.
We have a question on that. The question was the cost should be avoided. Maintenance on this will be minimal. It doesn't say how there will be periodic measurements of the liquid and the lady stops to be checked periodically for manure. But it doesn't say anything about whether the pit's going to be inspected, whether it's pumped, and we or it wouldn't necessarily show up visible things in the drainage spout leaking into the groundwater in a way that the soil is filtering it out so it looks like the water that is coming out of there. And also, there's no plan that says how quickly the problem will be repaired. But this is a concrete pit, just like a swimming pool or a basement. You get cracks in it, and the water can get out of there in a hurry to get into the groundwater. If it doesn't let the contractor or any other means by which you need somebody to fix it if it goes down. So this is an important problem, and if there's a leak in it, it needs to be fixed quickly. And so we feel that kind of submitted is insufficient to justify the 30 points that's claimed.
The footing tile he is referring to is all the way around the outside of the pit, and it is part of the requirements from the Iowa DNR. So it's formed, the concrete is poured and the tile is placed in a way that if there is any kind of leak on the wall or around the outside of it, it will collect in that tile. And then that will be visible.
There's actually a foot of rock or approximately a foot of rock that goes on top of the tile to, just like what we in a house, to allow anything to go into that tile, not to go into the soil, it'll go in the tile.
It'll be visible if you can detect the difference between any sediment and manure that might come in there during rainy months, or if there's no pollution coming through there that doesn't have visible sediment in it. You can have contamination of groundwater by means around the pit that has nothing to do with that. It's not going to show up in the visual inspection. We're suggesting there needs to be a plan. It has to be inspected each time that it's pumped out to make sure there's not cracks in there. And if there are cracks, fixed regardless of whether you're seeing it in the drainage tiles or where it's showing up in terms of the water levels. So if you're simply checking water levels in the pit, that can vary from time to time depending on whatever the conditions are outside, the heat, humidity, various other things that are going on. I think that's a logical thing to do, but you're only going to detect if there's something that's really pronounced in that case. You're going to detect if you have long-term seepage that goes on over years and you're not really checking the cracks in the bottom of the pit. I built a house one time and it was on clay, but it had a rock right in the middle of my basement. And I had a crack come up in the middle of my basement you would never have seen if you were going around the outside. That happens when you have concrete structures.
Questions, comments? Okay,
You're saying it's working.
how often are you pumping it? How often are you gonna pump it?
Once a year in the fall. So, that's something else we're taking points for is water efficient, feeders and water system. And so actually the pit won't even fill up once a year. We'll empty it every fall, but it won't even be near full.
Okay. Not taking any points on that one. 19, proposed confinement has a truck turnaround area. And there is a design, the Adams are going to design it coming in from the north so the trucks can turn around and then we'll be backing in from the road. 20, the owners have not had any administrative orders in the last 5 years. So there's 30 points for that one.
That didn't go back together.
24 points on the facility size.
Very garbled.
The animal facility will hold 3,720 swine, and that makes it 488 animal. That qualifies them for 20 points. Number 25. They're going to use feeding and watering systems that significantly reduce manure volume. So they're going to use wet dry feeders, which we have included information from Iowa State and from the actual company that produces the feeders that shows that the water wastage is a lot less. So the site qualifies for 25 points on. 26, liquid or dry manure. So the Adams have elected to always inject their manure. This becomes a condition of their permit. They are not allowed to surface apply manure unless they have some sort of written waiver from DNR. But they are electing to always surface apply manure, or excuse me, inject manure. And that qualifies them for 30 points.
We're questioning on that also. It's a matter of detail here. You see the going injection manure the same day it's applied. We assume that it's injected in such a way that it be injected in the ground. It's incorporated into the process of application. Okay. So if that's correct in here, but there's still no written statement regarding who's going to apply this, how it's going to be applied, how you know when it's going to be applied. If you have an injection equipment on your own, it needs to be stated in here. If you have a contract going to apply the manure, it needs to be stated in here.
Do you want to speak a little bit
Yeah,
about that?
well, and I have questions too, as far as what are you actually saying here that because they didn't put that in here, it should be a requirement of the matrix?
No, I'm not saying it necessarily should be a requirement that you have in the matrix that you specify all these points, but there's certain expectations in terms of the details so that you can determine whether or not those 30 points are.
But you feel that those shouldn't be qualifying points because they didn't give as much detail as you had expected.
Not as I had expected, because you need to determine whether or not they qualify for those points. My opinion of what you need to determine whether or not they qualify. My statement.
Jacob, what do you?
I have another concern about this particular one, because they talk about all of the positive benefits of injecting manure, which has to do with odor, but they don't talk about the fact that if you inject it into the soil to begin with in liquid form, it's going to get into the groundwater much more quickly, particularly if there's tile. I don't know if there's tile under the fields where you have application or not. And it's going to accelerate the process by which the manure is going to get into drainage tiles, which is going to get into the water. So we think if you're going to talk about the upside, which we agree with in terms of odors, you also need to talk about the downside.
Now what the fuck?
Because I know you have that
Can't hear it.
conversation.
Yeah, so the reason why we have not specified
Like bitch.
the exact model of piece of equipment and the day that it will happen and such, because then it's part of our permit and we would have to follow that every year. We're saying that we will always inject it with, but just like any improvement in technology and advancement in anything, currently we hire someone. We might possibly purchase our own someday. Injected, which is what we're taking points for and what we're discussing. But as far as
Okay, where's
if
the
we
audio?
use,
Where is it, Bill? Where?
I'm sorry, but there's somebody speaking that's interfering with what's going on. William and Susie Vesley, it appears that you're making quite a bit of noise. I don't know what's going on. It's hard for us to hear and carry on with what's going on. So I'm going to put that on mute. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
we could possibly use a knife or like a large wavy blade at an angle that would open the soil up and allow the manure to go in. I mean, there's multiple different ways that we could possibly go about it and might, years down the road.
So I think in this case, you're saying, okay, we've got a trust. Application overall is barely getting by. And
Hey, Alexandria, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Jeff. I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good.
Jeff Shipley, you're not muted.
so anyway,
So you're,
that's the point we wanted to make here.
so to you supervisors, you're not just taking my word for it. This is a part of the condition of our plan that the DNR will make sure happens. And if we don't, there'll be significant penalties, I mean, we're binding in law for the future. It's not just our word.
And talk about the rate that's applied.
You want to know like how we calculate it?
Well, the rate, when you talked to me, you mentioned about the different loans.
Right, it's calculated based on the specific site. So we look at what they're actually producing as far as cost, what their transportation looks like, what their soil samples look like. And then we take what their actual manure sample from the barn looks like. So we've got their nutrients there in front of us. And we use that to calculate a rate that applies to that specific field.
And actually, we have more than enough acres based off the maximum rate we could apply. And so how we do it is we spread out the manure across however many acres we might have that fall and apply the lowest rate to cover on the ground. Even if we could potentially, apply a higher rate.
Just as a point of clarification, the application that's allowed is based on production parameters rather than environmental parameters. It says, okay, this is the amount to maximize production. It doesn't say this is the amount to protect the groundwater and the environment. That's just the nature of how it's written. You're making the assessment based on whatever the universities and others recommend from the standpoint of production agriculture. And they say, okay, if you're involved in production agriculture, and you're primarily involved in this, to maximize profits or maximize yields or efficiency, this is the rates we recommend you do for that. It's not recommended rates that come from DNR, environmental protection agency, anywhere else that says these are the rates that will minimize environmental impact of this fertilization or manure application.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not putting on any more DNR or the university recommends. They're recommending based on production levels.
And that
Not
sounds like
recommending based on environmental levels.
But that sounds like something that's more based on how the matrix is written through the legislature and what needs to go on there. That's not something that we can consider as part of whether they get the points or not when it comes to this.
So for the legislators that's on, that would be a good clarification, write that down for when the matrix gets.
Technically, that's.
I wouldn't agree with
It's not even.
I wouldn't agree with raising the issue, we're not gonna apply anything more than therefore the environment's protected. That's what the implication. I'm saying, no, that's not the implication you draw from the recommendations that come from Iowa State. In fact, Iowa State recommendations will go approximately 20% over what the average yield would be put in. And they say, based on average, you're going to do better than the average a certain percentage of the time. And so they calculate, okay, how much over can you go so that those years of better growing conditions, you can optimize the return on nitrogen fertilizers you're applying. That's just production.
And that's,
production of
John, that's a good point for the matrix when it gets to be updated. Let's continue on this one right now. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. 27 to 30, no points taken.
31.
31. The next points are elective points that the Adams have chosen to help protect groundwater. They're taking, excuse me, an additional separation distance of 200 feet for a land application of manure to the closest public use area. So there's a map included. It's just showing a buffer around the field. If there's any kind of public use area, at this time there are not any near their fields, but it becomes a condition of the permit. If they were ever to add a field, there's a playground next to it, Adams are going to stay at least an additional 200 feet away. It becomes a condition of the permit. For 32, additional separation distance of 200 feet above.
Like you got about a 50-foot gap there.
You see,
We're going to take a pause and mute.
I saw that.
Please mute your lines, everybody.
let's see.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry, Rachel.
yes.
Number 32, 5 points. Additional separation distance of 200 feet above the minimum requirement for land application of manure to the closest educational institution, religious institution, or commercial enterprise. And so with this, also as a condition of the permit, the Adams are saying that there are not currently any within 200 feet of their fields. If they add a field, they will maintain additional separation distance. Number 33, 10 points. Additional separation distance of 50 feet over the minimum requirements for land application and manure to the closest private drinking wells. So there are not any currently close to the fields, but once again, and this is an elective one, they are saying that if they add any fields at any point, there's any wells next to them, we're going to stay an additional 50 feet away from them. 35, 10 points. Additional separation distance above the minimum requirements for land application of manure to the closest high quality water, high quality resource water, or protected water area. There are not any currently at this time, but the Adams have elected to stay an additional 400 feet. If they put any kind of fields in there that would be close to a high quality water resource, they're going to stay an additional 400 feet away. One thing I did want to point out, all these elective separation distances, as we notice, they're not huge points amounts. So the Adams are really choosing things that are not necessarily high points values, but things that give additional separation distance, which is kind of the point of the matrix, them to take elective stuff and to make that a condition of the permit.
Yeah,
40.
we took over 500, and so at 440 the maximum. When we talk about above and beyond, we could have stopped and not taken, but we chose to.
Construction permit contains an emergency action plan. It is contained in here. Barns have all the emergency numbers. That way, if the Adams are there, or the neighbors stop, or if they're person shoring, if there's any kind of emergency, to have all the numbers listed. This is something that's standard in the industry, but the guys have gone above and beyond here and listed out any kind of contracting company that would be needed, including any kind of earth moving equipment or anything else like that that would be needed if any of those tiles or anything like that would need to be checked on. 41, the construction permit application contains a closure plan. This is just a plan so that In the event down the road, the building seems to be closed, we have a written plan for that. That's all the points we got.
Good. Any
We
comment?
have a couple of comments on this. You know, 440 points is the requirement. And I have the points mentioned here on number 5 and number 26. That would bring me down to 20, somewhere along in there would bring it below. But I think there's a, you know, that's hardly a statement that you're really trying to go above and beyond when you cut it that close. That's about 62.5% of the total number of points. If this was really a strong recommendation, you know, if this would get them a grade in school, it would be kind of like a B minus. You don't go home and brag to your mother when you get a B minus and say, look, it could have been even lower. If it's when you're really striving to, you know, fulfill your responsibility to the community, why not come in with one that's 800, 850, 900?
I think it's generally recognized that the master matrix is very out of date. It's over 20 years old and does need to be updated. Unfortunately, this board cannot do that. That's a state issue, and that's why we have legislators on here to hear the concerns. And
we have 2 more points that could affect the score. I refer to those. It has to do with the construction permit application. It has some missing applications, missing data in here that's required, which could affect the way you propose this. It's on page 5. It's called submittal requirements. It's on the construction permit application, where it talks about proposed component of operation to be used to form structure and so on. It has to check the boxes, the check in 585, indicating none of the above. And it says if you check in that particular place, then you should make your decision based on a checklist, which is provided on page 10. Provided, there's no checklist submitted to the master matrix or with the plan. So we don't know what checked. You're saying basically trust us that we checked it. You don't need to see the checklist because we said we qualified. So, questions about whether you go on some of these other issues, whether or not you're going to be constructed for. And then also on the construction design plan, item 3, information on page 3, item C, details of the proposed design. Says if you check box B, it requires information regarding soil type classification, which is in tables D3 and D4. Pages 7 and 8, I think that may be 8 and 9 actually. Let's get that again. And certain decisions regarding the soil record. We don't have D3, D4. We don't know what the soil the type of soil that you have where you're constructing can have a major impact on what the threat is with respect to cracking of the pit or many other things that have to do with the construction site. You know, again, it's missing information. So I think you need to take that into consideration, because if some of these are, you know, turned out to be something different than you might have anticipated, then it could lead you to a different conclusion regarding some of the other scores on the matrix.
Can I speak about that a little bit? Okay, first, either one of these pieces of paper that he is commenting on are part of the matrix scoring. They're completely separate. They're DNR pieces of paper. They're sent to the DNR engineer to give him information. They're not scoreable information. The construction permit checklist is a DNR internal checklist. The construction permit application is always turned in pages 1 through 9. It's always turned in 1 through 9. And the DNR is aware of what their own checklists are. And if I'm ever missing anything, they get a hold of me right away. So they go through the checklist. It's an internal checklist.
I would suggest that the already add that to the instructions and say the checklist and whatever other data is in there, that's private information, DNR is not included.
It is in the instructions. It's not included in the stuff you're required to submit.
And whatever the appropriate instructions are, so we will know that somebody's checking this to make sure that it qualifies to.
I know, do you have any comments from going out to the site?
Not really. Everything looked pretty straightforward the way they have everything laid out. They're also leaving trees in place around the area out there that could be removed but aren't going to be. And so the way the drainage is going to work with it, I didn't see any physical problems with it out there. It can be contained. So that's my views on it.
Yeah. You know, I would say the Adams are very accommodating. You know, Darren and I could easily visualize where the site was going to be and the drainage and stuff. They were very forthcoming, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I just have a couple of questions that aren't on the matrix, but they're generally accepted conservation practices. So I know we talked about trees, and I know you mentioned, the ones on the matrix, and I do understand that have pretty tight criteria, but your plan is to plant some trees, right?
Yes, it's just not part of the conditional.
And it's a good thing to plant trees because that at least helps get anything up in the air and scattered rather than over to the neighbors. How about cover crops? Is any other ground where you're putting manure on going to have cover crops, or does it?
In the spring, and
Okay, good.
actually there's a plan in place to, cover crops and stuff like that. But again, not a condition.
Oh, I know, that's not, I'm just,
Our farming operation does believe in cover crops.
yeah. I'm just, there's some good conservation practices out there, and just like to encourage that, because as everybody knows, statewide, we could use more of them. Talk to us about spreading manure on frozen ground. I know that's not to happen, but I know as a farmer that can be a challenge. So how's that work?
It's not possible.
Not legal.
It's okay, thank you.
What was that? I couldn't hear the question.
Spreading manure on frozen ground. It's not supposed to happen, and but I'm just asking general questions I'd ask anybody.
Well, so like I mentioned before, the water efficient waters and the depth of the pit that we're putting in,
Yeah.
again, not a part of the master matrix, but we have actually more than 12 months of manure storage. And so if we intend to apply manure every November 1st, if weather would not allow, we have plenty of storage. And actually,
Well, the point is, you can't knife it if it's frozen, but you can certainly spread it on top of frozen ground. It's done quite often.
Or is the size of confinement building, though, that's not legal to do.
Yeah, it's not legal to do.
No.
So, yeah, and they don't do that. I'm just having a conversation about some generally accepted things. The only concern I have, the main one, which is not part of the matrix, and this is where I think the matrix needs to be updated. We are getting to the place, especially in that part of the county, where there's a lot of hogs and there's a lot of population. There's probably 26 homes, like within a mile and a half, mine included. However, there are a lot of trees in between, which is always a good thing. But at some point, I hope the matrix will address population density and pig density, because it doesn't. And again, it's a matter of we need to have that updated at the state level. So that said, are there any comments on either people in the room or Zoom that are pertinent to this?
Since you brought up the issue of residents close by, this is a point that was brought up at the public hearing, but it's only a clarification of the fact, stating the fact that needs to be clarified from the public hearing. According to this, the statement was made at the public hearing that there was only closest residence, which upwind from the southwest, was 1 1/3 mile. There was no real mention of the fact that it's only at certain times of the year.
We're not talking. I'm just.
The fact is that what we have on here, there are there are 10 residences within 1 mile radius of this particular unit. And that was not the implication that was given at the public hearing. I think it's a point of clarification that you're making your final decision. And water is air quality issue is a big issue, and we give a reference in here to an article. The article that you have a link to, that's in the statement, if you go to that, that particular study was published by the National Institute of Science. It was done, it's not some advocacy organization that's done it. It said that then within the year that they looked at, there was 17,900 people that had died prematurely as a consequence of living in this.
Hold it, because we're gonna try to stick to matrix comments, and are there any
I
comments?
just wanted to make the comment that.
The comment was made at the public hearing.
Article, Elsie Perry is a friend of mine. She was in North Carolina. She's worked for years in fighting the CAFOs that are right next to her. You go to Right to Harm, and you'll see Elsie, an older black woman. She went and made a testimony before the legislature of North Carolina, and they treated her like an 8-year-old black woman as if she didn't know anything. We get treated when we raise issues about odors and about air pollution, as if we're ignorant, we don't know anything. That's the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, that can be a concern. Unfortunately, it's not part of the matrix. Are there any comments here specific to the matrix?
You brought up, and I understand you're coming from this, since the legislators are on there, you're talking about making the changes to the matrix. And I guess it's an issue of glass half full, glass half empty, but the reality of the situation is move out into the unincorporated area of the county, they're moving into an agricultural business.
Is that specific to the matrix?
You brought it up, and so what I'm saying is that in contradiction to that, people who move out there need to be aware where they're moving. If they move up to the Desert Refinery and they complain about the smell and the odor and the dust, they moved there. They moved into that district. And so to penalize everybody that's out there and want to strengthen that master matrix, to me is something that the legislature needs to take a look at.
Right. Okay. Do we have any questions on Zoom specific to the matrix scoring? And that we're not shared
Just
during.
a minute, Dee. I'm
Darren,
looking at some comments here
It's
first.
gonna take Darren a minute to go through them, put them in the chat.
Okay,
If it wasn't at the public hearing, he'll share it.
let's see.
So it'll take a little bit. We appreciate your Zoom skills, Darren.
We are opposed to further expansion of this facility or introduction to other CAFOs in the area. We come from a CAFO town. It is unbelievable. My husband got frequent. Okay, these were all things that have went over. Let's see.
I have something I'd like to say about the matrix when you're ready to hear me.
Okay, go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, so this is question 26.
Okay.
Regarding the manure application injection. Jacob Adam made a comment that when they apply the manure, that the DNR makes sure it happens the way they say they're going to do it. Well, I know from experience and from speaking to the DNR that the DNR does not come and they do not check to find out if manure is being applied at the rate and in the places that they say it's going to be applied. And they aren't even allowed to look at the manure application records. That's considered private information. They can only look at those records if there's a complaint made against the CAFO owner about how it's being operated. And then every year they either do an update to their manure management plan, and every 4 years they have to do a new manure management plan, which is a plan that says what they're planning to do, but it doesn't necessarily mean what they wind up doing. So it's actually erroneous to say that the DNR is going to make sure that they do it the right way, because they do not have the capacity to go out and check everybody's manure management plan and make sure that they're doing it right. There is no computerized GPS program in the tankers that reports where they're applying manure and how much they're applying manure. So it would make sense to me that there would be some sort of formal agreement that is presented with this question, to get points for this question, that at least shows that, you know, they're going to use a certain hauler, and they're going to use, you know, or a number of haulers that they can choose from, or there's like a contract that shows that they're going to do it the way they say they're going to do it. All we have is a check mark on a form. So, you know, I feel like that's something really important that should be taken into consideration when you consider the points on this question.
Okay, any other comments specific to the matrix? You want to see if there's any?
Not really.
Okay,
Is there anyone that would like to unmute and speak themselves?
that's something that has not been mentioned at the public hearing or so far today.
Okay,
Yes, I would like to speak.
this is Dr.
Michael Olmsted.
Homestead.
I didn't attend the first meeting, and so this comment is more general, but and it won't take long. So,
Yeah, limit that to 3 minutes, please.
okay, let me make sure I've got my timer on here. Okay, good. So, if we just choose to ignore the product that's being produced, which is laden with antibiotics, probably to keep falling.
Okay, we're trying to keep the comments specific to the matrix. Is it specific?
The man just said any other comments that people didn't attend last week would like to make, and I'm responding to what he said.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. So if we choose to ignore the outcome of this process, there are antibiotics that are being fed to animals basically to prevent them from falling ill within and gain weight. They're laden with hormones, and there's a poor quality end result that children and adults. I teach anatomy and physiology as a full-time faculty member and teach in another medical clinic, dental clinic, so I know what I'm talking about. And let's say we choose to ignore the water quality issues. The water quality issue, Iowa's 27th out of 50 states, and it doesn't have a population that people would be generating this kind of water quality. We've got 85,000 CAFOs as of 2020, factory farms in Iowa. We're third in the nation. So let's just pretend these things don't exist and just kind of sweep all those points under the rug. What are we left with? What we're left with is one or two people are affecting the quality of life and health of a much larger number of people. And if I were going to buy a home in a rural area, and I do live in Fairfield, in a rural area, I'd be darn sure that I wasn't going to be next to a CAFO. A person would be a fool, an idiot, not to look into that. So property values are going to be impacted. You know, they are. And so you have the majority that's being impacted by a very small minority. And this really isn't democracy. I don't care what the matrix says or anything else. To ignore this and just go forward because of some protocol that's not well defined and well established. And my understanding is there's a place within this discussion where this board has the ability to make a correction in this regard and doesn't have to acquiesce to the state. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And to clarify that, the state makes the laws, and our role in this is to score the matrix and make a recommendation. The DNR has the final say. So if this board chooses to not support the application, the DNR can say yes. If this board chooses to support the application, the DNR could say no, based on something they found. The final decision is with the DNR. And I guess the reason that I've spoken a lot to the need to update the matrix, any industry that has 20-year-old regulation, technology changes and everything. So that, of course, is a separate discussion at the state level, but that's reality. So that said, board, you each have a copy of what we need to send back. And when they send these, it's a very tight timeline. So I'm going to read it with the blanks. County Master Matrix scoring and recommendation. It'll say the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors have reviewed the matrix and construction permit application for Hillview Site 2. And then the public notice was published on, and we'll get that detail from the auditor's office. Okay, what is the matrix score by the county is what we need to decide, board. And then if the county scored matrix is different than submitted, then the county score matrix is attached with justifications. Supplemental letters or documentation is being sent to the DNR. So all of the written comments that were turned in by the deadline of May 12th will be submitted. And I can tell you before the meeting, I asked the auditor's office to start scanning them because they need to come in today. They need to be in before Monday. So those will be sent along with this. Upon review and inspection of construction site and documents provided, and then it'll be we, the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors, recommend the permit application be approved or disapproved. So do we have a motion? Do we have any motions here?
Can I say something before you take a vote?
Is it new information? Because we're really...
Yeah, so you have the ability, the master matrix, the construction evaluation resolution or resolution that you sign every year to adopt the master matrix gives you the ability to fail the master matrix for any other reason beside the points that can be scored. You may have to be forced to sign the scores, sign the points that are being scored, because we may not have enough to deny the points, but that last whereas on that resolution, and I believe John Eichert may have given you a copy of that when you had the public hearing, it gives you the opportunity to fail the master matrix for any other reason. Now, there are a lot of reasons to fail the master matrix. You've got a large community in Jefferson County that do not support additional CAFO growth in the county. You've got people living in the area that do not want the CAFO being put next to them. We've got an accumulation of, we've got a lot of CAFOs to begin with, but not as many as Washington County or Keokuk. The people of Jefferson County do not want to have a county that is similar to Washington or Keokuk County. And it's acknowledged that the master matrix is really a failed system of really properly protecting the residents of any county in the state. So many counties around the state, a number of them have signed resolutions in support of a moratorium until the CAFO, the master matrix has been basically rehauled. But a number of counties have also failed master matrices, even though they're the points there to pass it, to make a statement to the state legislature that this system is not working and people are not happy with it. And you have the ability to do that. And I know I represent a lot of people who would like you to take that kind of a leadership role to make a statement. Yes, the DNR will pass this master matrix. This CAFO will go in, but at least you as a county board can add your voice to the many voices around the state that are calling for a change. And so I would like to urge you to very seriously consider doing that and taking into account. I'm looking at all these people that are on this call. Most of these people I know and are not in favor of of more CAFO development in the county. And
okay. Hey, Diane, I know you've sent us those comments, and thank you. You want to wrap it up real quick here?
Well, but like I said, I would like to just urge you to fail the matrix as a statement, you know, that you want to see change.
Okay. I think the place for that's at one of our Monday board meetings, if we would choose to do a letter of support to either revising the matrix or the moratorium. Here, we are here to act on this application. So, any discussion from the board? Can you make any motion?
I have no, I have no comments. I have no comments.
Okay, do you want to make any motions for this matrix?
I would make a motion that we pass this matrix as has been presented to us today.
I second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Hamilton, second by Trish. Yes. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you all.
We appreciate the opportunity to make comments on it. I understand this is a controversial issue, there's two sides to it. But I think we need to have open discussion.
We
with
do.
our community. We appreciate the opportunity to engage on it. I'm speaking on behalf of Jefferson and the people.
We appreciate that you guys came out and saw the site, not all the counties.
I would have been there, but I was on
It's a big
practice.
deal that you guys came out and can see what's going on.
Yep. All right.
And we appreciate the input because you do research your information. Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Yes, second.
In favor. Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Right. Paperwork time.